Welcome back, everyone, to Vox Markets. My name is Paul Hill. I'm delighted again to be able to speak to CEO Adam Hill and non-exec chairman Alistair Macdonald of Oncimmune, a global immunodiagnostics firm. So welcome, gents.
Good to speak to you again, Paul.
Yeah, well, there's lots been happening over the last sort of 6 months since we spoke, not least the results 2 weeks ago, plus the sort of positive contract news. But before we sort of dig into the details, Alistair, I don't suppose you could give your quick thoughts on what attracted you to Oncimmune originally, your first sort of impressions of the business, and ultimately where you'd like to take the group.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So yeah, I mean, I've known Adam for a while. We worked briefly together in the past, so great to reconnect with Adam. You know, the Oncimmune story is an interesting one. I think it's initially a product company, now switching to more of a service base, which is where I built my career with Syneos and other organizations. And looking at what they're doing, looking at where we're heading, an emerging market, testing, biomarker testing, biomarker identification, etc., is a very interesting area. And I saw that from the clinical trials perspective. So helping to build a services business, looking at what we're doing, how it relates to customer needs, how it relates to that demand, how we're going to scale that business, how we're going to drive that forward, looking at the pipeline development, etc., all very promising signs. And, it's been great to work with the team now for a couple of months and see what those elements of the business are, how we can accelerate them, how we bring more kind of ordered growth and scaling to the work that we're doing. And yeah, excited about what I see as a pathway forward and the work that Adam and the team are doing to take us there.
Great. Well, we'll cover a bit more of that later on. But Adam, now, if you could just sort of give us a quick sort of few sentences on what, sort of the last 12 months, because I know when we last spoke, you'd had a sort of like quiet first quarter. You then saw a surge in orders in the second quarter. And it seems as though now you've got another surge sort of 6 months later. But if you could sort of fill in the blanks and just to explain to investors what actually happened at the coalface.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. And look, your listeners will remember that, of course, there are two sides to our business. There's the ImmunoINSIGHTS business, which is our pharma services business. And there's the original business, the legacy business, if you like, which is our early cancer detection business. The vast majority of our growth is coming out of our pharma services business, ImmunoINSIGHTS, which is based out of Dortmund, in Germany. And you're quite right. It is a phasic business. We find that business comes like London buses. You get all of them at once, and then you don't get anything for a couple of months, giving you a bit of a breathing room, quite frankly, in order to deliver and recognize revenue from those contracts that you've signed. It does mean, of course, that you have to have a healthy pipeline to try and smooth revenue and do your best to meet market expectation. But we've had an excellent 12 months, actually. In our first year, having bought the ImmunoINSIGHTS business, a company called Protein Diagnostics 3 years ago, we did 3 contracts. The second year we did 9. We've gone and done 18 contracts in the year to the end of May, which we've reported on recently. So we continue to grow rapidly. We're continuing to land quality work. We're continuing to expand our stable of customers. And importantly, we continue to win repeat business from those customers that we've delighted with our deliverables. That's not to say that, this line of business is not shielded from the vagaries of the wider market. Of course, we all know that biotech funding has taken a very substantial hit, and that certainly is about a third of our pipeline. But we've relied in the last 6 months very heavily upon our pharma customers and our academic customers in order to support work, whilst biotechs maybe have fallen off a little bit. What I'm delighted to be able to say, though, of course, as we go into the new financial year, which started at the beginning of September, we had already roughly 40% revenue coverage for the year out of contracts that had already been signed last year, which again is the best position that I've ever been in since we started the company, and I feel particularly confident about the year to come.
And what sort of size? Can you just remind investors of the sort of the contract size and duration, and what type of work that the Immuno sort of like insights platform does for sort of like, I don't know, a leading biopharma company?
Yeah, no problem. So of course you'll remember that we receive blood samples very typically from a trial that's in progress or a trial that's completed, and those samples have been banked. Those samples are shipped to us in Dortmund, and we analyze those samples using our proprietary technology, producing a heat map of colors in its very basic form. We then quality control that data, and we go about analyzing that data, and we analyze that data in context, which is really our differentiator, if you like, in that we've done lots of projects. We've done over 130 commercial projects in a small number of therapy areas. And so we've seen the sorts of patterns that we see from each of these samples time and time again, and we're able to bring that context to bear on our customer contracts. The contract size is typically between 75,000 euros, maybe it's 50 to 75 samples, or all the way up to contracts that are now maybe a couple of thousand samples. Very typically, we start small. The smaller contracts tend to be run in parallel to other technologies. It's not unusual for pharma companies in particular, less so biotechs, but pharma companies in particular, to run what we would refer to as a bake-off. They're running 3 or 4 technologies over the same samples to compare the results. And I can tell you that in the last year, we've done 5 of those bake-offs and we've never lost. So there's always repeat work on the back of those. We're very confident within the team not to ever lose a pilot. And so even the small contracts end up converting over time to far larger contracts.
And is this sort of driven by personalized medicine and sort of like, you know, the trial stratification for the patient? So effectively, if I don't know, let's pick a name out of a hat, Roche, for instance, and I'm doing a leading trial on immunotherapy somewhere in oncology, and I'm trying to get a trial number of trial patients in, and it's choosing the ones who will respond best, or at least have the least amount of side effects for the drug that they're going to actually test.
That's exactly right. So we're experts in immune biomarkers, so understanding how the immune system responds to drugs that are aimed at treating a particular disease. We focus on cancer, autoimmune disease, and some infectious diseases. And very typically, we used either after the study has finished because something has shown up in the study that the drug company hadn't anticipated, or we used to support selection of patients based on disease state. Patients with SLE, for example, may look very different to another set of patients with SLE. And so using our biomarkers, you're able to better standardize the patient group that you're looking to treat, and therefore improve the chances of getting a positive outcome, or at least an outcome that tells you whether the drug is working within that cohort. And so there's a number of different ways in which our biomarkers can be used, but yes, largely they are directed towards picking the patients that are going to respond positively to a drug and identifying early those patients that are going to go on to get immune-related adverse events, so the nasty side effects, which might mean a drug isn't appropriate for them.
Good. And then sort of, Alistair, just from your sort of 25-year experience with Syneos, I know you've been dealing with a lot of these big biopharma, and they're sort of like, they take a long time to get on board, and but they tend to be sort of like quite loyal. How important is it to get onto the sort of like strategic buyer list? Because I know Adam and his team has been doing that, and now has got sort of like a real sort of like 15 of the top sort of 20. How important is that, and how big a USP is it for sort of barriers to entry for competitors?
I think that's a massive step for this organization. You know, and one of the things I commented to Adam when reviewing the commercial piece was how advanced Oncimmune is in terms of getting on those, you know, getting through those gatekeepers, getting onto those lists of approved suppliers. So for us, I think that's critical because they build anchor tenants in your revenue profile, and they are the organizations that do the most of the work that we're going to plug into. and are likely to bring more and more repeat business because they're constantly developing drugs. The bio pharma market is kind of separated into those biotechs who maybe take 1 or 2 shots on goal versus the big pharmas who are constantly pushing work through and have a steady pacing. And getting onto those pipelines where there is a steady pacing, where there is repeat business opportunity, where work can spread within the organization is a very big positive for us. So, yeah, I mean, I'm delighted with the customer base that Oncimmune has developed. One of the things about our sector is it does move slowly, and people are slow on the uptake, but you do tend to build a group of loyal customers, loyal followers over the years. You'd have to deliver well. I think the team is delivering very well on those contracts that have been won, but you also have to service them from a commercial perspective. And I think the work that Adam and the team did prior to my arrival in identifying a commercial team, that scaling it, we're starting to reap some of the benefits of that with a building pipeline and penetration into some of those larger accounts, the establishment of MSA type relationships. I think they're all key. As we try and push and grow for scale, those customers are going to be really important to us.
Yeah, they do seem to be an excellent endorsement of the technical one capability of the firm, but also the scientific value of that auto antibody profiling service.
Yeah.
Now, Adam, just in terms of obviously you've had a good start to the year. You've won quite a few contracts. So you got 40% order sort of cover, revenue cover for the year ahead. Can you just take through sort of where you're seeing most of the sort of the contract work? Is it coming from the States? Because that's where it's sort of like kicked off, I think, in Q2. Or is it and in which sort of like verticals? Is it mainly on oncology?
Yeah, great question. So about 80 to 85% of our work is contracted out of the US. Now, you have to remember, of course, the global pharmaceutical companies really are global, and they have R&D teams around the world. But yeah, 80 to 85% is contracted out of the US. The vast majority of that actually is in immuno-oncology. It probably represents 50 to 60% of our work, 20-25% autoimmune disease, maybe 20% infectious diseases. So that's really excellent because, of course, when we bought Protogen Diagnostics, we had pushed them into a corner through our IP base, if you remember, whereby they could only work in the autoimmune space. And so it really has been a rapid growth in immuno-oncology projects that we've seen over the last 3 years. And I expect that to continue so that, in the next couple of years, it may even be as much as 70% of our contract bearing revenue moving forward. And that pipeline is building really steadily. We now are certainly into our stride and seeing the pipeline grow at somewhere between 750 to 850,000 euros a month. So that I think come the back end of this financial year, we'll be at around about 20 to 22 million euros worth of pipeline servicing a revenue that I hope this year sees us tick into profitability.
Brilliant. And then Alistair, just your sort of first impressions of scaling that. I mean, Adam and his team are sort of winning business. It's sort of like how, from your, so as the experience at Cedars, how do we then accelerate that? And if we do, then have we got sufficient sort of like a capacity in terms of the Dortmund facility? Because I know that we've increased the facility there and the sort of the front end in the sales side out in the States. What's your sort of view of the sort of supply demand and how to scale it?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's always a balancing act because you've almost got to predict what you're going to win, and then how does that timing wise turn into revenue through the persecution of the tests. And I think the scale, for me, it's important for us to continue to scale appropriately in the commercial group. And that's also kind of the marketing message, as well as the on the ground, boots on the ground sales team. And these sales teams are quite difficult to build because it's a very technical sale. You know, Adam and I spent some time with the commercial team in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and really impressed by their knowledge and understanding of the work that the organization does. And I think it's a complex sale, and you have to have that. So finding those people at the right time, in the right place, with that blend of scientific skill and sales skill set is difficult. But I think the team that they've got in place is one that's worked together before, seems to be scaling it up well. As Adam mentioned, you know, the pipeline continues to expand. So the demand is out there. We like that. We've got to engage it through that sales team. Then obviously on the operational side, we've got to be able to deliver the work, deliver the analysis, deliver our findings. We like to add value through providing that additional level of insight from our expertise. And, you know, but getting those people in a market that's challenging. You know, everybody knows and understands the demand on all kinds of service organizations, and that's no different for us. We have to make sure that we stay ahead of that. We have to make sure that we build those pipelines, whether they be people who we can hire in who are capable of doing the right kind of work straight away, or we build our own. We work to bring in PhD students, to bring in interns, etc., who can help us, who can get something out of an engagement with us as a student or as somebody transition into, you know, into paid employment. So we've got to think about all those channels. And for me, growing a business, you don't just carry on doing the same thing over and over. You have to do a series of gear changes, like accelerating a car, right? So doing more of the same is normally a way to really ratchet up the costs in a business. So thinking about how do we make those gear changes? How do we automate things? Are there opportunities to do some of the work in, you know, lower cost jurisdictions as we grow the scale? We'll look at all those things when the time's right, but certainly from my experience, they're the things I would anticipate that we'll be looking at as we grow this business.
Right. And then Adam, in terms of if we've got the sort of the, you know, the first parts of the, you know, the investment in terms of we've done the Dortmund capacity increase and got the sales team. Can you just remind investors of sort of like, you know, if that we've got 11 million pipeline and hopefully a 22 by the end of the year, etc. How much of that would actually drop through to the bottom line? What is the sort of the gross margin or the EBITDA drop through? Because as I remember, it's a very profitable business, and, you know, Insights.
Yeah, the gross margin in the ImmunoINSIGHTS business is about 80%. You know, I mean, this is like all pharma services business, sort of operationally geared or leveraged in that there's often a high fixed cost base, but as soon as you tip over that, you tend to find that the top line drops to the bottom line with very little impedance. So certainly within the capacity that we've got in Dortmund, there is a very, very profitable business ahead of us, and that capacity, to remind listeners, is it's about 30,000 samples a year, and we charge around about 1,100 euros a sample. So the maths, of course, you can do, and you can see that's particularly attractive.
Right. And in terms of sort of like just turning gears into the earlyCDT test, etc. Can you just remind investors of how we're doing that, Adam? Because obviously the partner out in the States, Biodizix, is now got Medicare approval and is starting to sell that one into the States, I guess. Adam?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things to update on the earlyCDT side of the business. I mean, the first is that, of course, our partner in the US, as you said, has gone and got Medicare approval. They've found a force multiplier in partnering with Philips, and are starting to get into their stride post the pandemic. And of course, you know, launching into the pandemic was unfortunate because the subspecialty that, of course, was impacted the greatest were interventional pulmonologists, where they were essentially focusing the sale. But that now is starting to generate decent volumes We, as you will remember, have both a royalty on those volumes sold into the market and also an exclusive supply agreement. It's still shy, and it will continue to be shy this year, of the volume minima, and so we would expect Biodesix to be true-upping against that volume minima. But equally on that side of the business, we have made some substantial changes to the way in which we deliver that operation. And as a result, that business is on a pro forma basis profitable and will continue to be profitable with no additional headcount as the volume demands from Biodesix continue to grow. And I think the final thing to say is that whilst we have changed the way in which we deliver that business, we haven't taken our foot off engaging other potential partners in different jurisdictions for the test. We have ongoing conversations in South America, in Europe, and importantly, close to home in the NHS, now that that system is also emerging from the pandemic. So on a standalone basis, this is looking to be quite an attractive little business. Certainly will act as a bit of a cash cow for us in the short to medium term.
Good. And then just turning now to the sort of the M&A side, Alistair. Again, just from sort of, I know you've been in there for sort of 2 to 3 months, so I am sort of like testing you here a bit, but to scale this business, what sort of like acquisitions would you be looking? Would it be sort of like regional sort of access, or is it skills, or is it, sort of technology? How are you sort of picturing it to scale that business?
I think it's probably going to be a combination of all of those that you just mentioned. But for me, it comes down to really what the commercial team can take in front of the buyers as a collective kind of service package that makes it easy to buy together. I think that's the easiest way to scale it on the commercial side. And then, we can deal with the separate testing on the back end operationally, whether that be a broader set of tests that we can do, whether it be kind of imaging, those kind of preclinical skill sets that sit together and fit together, in some of this clinical testing as well, are kind of the ideal locations to buy. If you can capture some cost synergies by, combining things into panels, then great. But I think it's about building capabilities that you can put in front of customers as this market emerges, people being able to look at what the side effects and the targeting of their new treatments. How do we help them do that, and how do we do that easily for them? So how do we make it easy for them to say, right, Oncimmune is the guys and gals we go to for this kind of work, and we become a part of their process. So thinking about it from that perspective, capabilities, definitely regional as well. I think, because you and Adam previously spoke about the amount of work that comes out of the US, it's always the same in these markets. That's where the action is, but without losing the focus that we have in the European markets with biotechs as well. But yeah, bringing those service lines together and expanding that way, I think it's the way to go for us.
Good. And then Adam, just in terms of funding, if we just park obviously M&A, which nobody knows how much money you might use, but just in terms of sort of the internal organic, we've obviously done a lot of the investment up front anyway. Can you just, what's the sort of like, presumably we can convert the pipeline into sales orders with the cash that we have.
That's exactly the plan. We're going to continue to grow organically and at the same time invest in our own organic R&D programs. We have a very active technology roadmap, which we're delivering against, and that technology roadmap will allow us to more efficiently and effectively deliver our services into the hands of people that can use it. It is knowledge intensive at the moment. It is a premium price service, and the more we can stretch that, the skill sets of both the BD team and our scientific teams, the better. And so you'll see more on that as we move through the year. But we don't anticipate having to come back to the market in order to fund any of that activity.
Good. And then just coming full circle again, Alistair, in terms of the next sort of 2 to 4 years, what would be a sort of like a success for you? I mean, obviously, you created an enormous business and a lot of value with Syneos. I mean, if you do anything like that, then I think you'll be in the FTSE 100 pretty quick. So, but what's sort of what the sort of the targets? I mean, nobody will hold you to it, but what are the targets you're setting on yourself to get to this business in, let's say, 4 to 5 years?
Yeah, well, I think, establishing ourselves as a market leader in this space, I think the team is certainly moving forward with that. It's a growing space. We want to be seen as, I think success, without putting numbers to it, would be that we're seen as, an essential part of anybody's development program. Where immune biomarkers are going to be an important part of that program. So, I think we've got a lot to offer. The technology has got a lot to offer. And for us to get that in front of people, make a consistent delivery, be high quality, drive a strongly growing business. I think they're all things that, Adam and I are very well aligned on in terms of what this will look like successly. When I first met the rest of the board with Oncimmune, I said to them, look, what we've done in the past on the pharma services side with Syneos, okay, that doesn't guarantee that we're going to get that done with Oncimmune as well. But we'll give it our best shot, and hopefully we can have some fun along the way. And Adam and I, it's not necessary to wear a gilet at Oncimmune, but some days, we have the same haircut and we seem to dress the same way today. So, but that's not one of the success factors. We don't always have to all look the same. So
you've got the same beard as well, which is pretty good.
Yeah, but we're looking to grow this business, and success, I think, for us is to establish ourselves as the market leader in this space, and like I say, become just a necessary part of people's development pathways. When they think of the kind of skills that we bring, we're right there to do it for them. We get baked into that as much as Syneos does for people on the clinical development side when they hit large scale clinical trial space.
Yeah, so they're basically the industry go-to provider for all things auto antibody. Exactly. Now, so just more shorter term, Adam, are we going to just in the next sort of few months for investors to sort of flag? Are we getting maybe some contract news or what? Just continue with the development with the business?
Yeah, that's right. And look, I mean, you've asked me the question before, and I'll give you the same answer. It's about contracts. Yeah. We're out there winning business as hard as we possibly can, influencing, making friends, and quite honestly, baking ourselves into future work. It's a long sales cycle, and sometimes can be frustrating. Because that sales cycle is affected by externalities, but the team are aggressive. They're knowledgeable. They're very, very experienced, and they're here to stay the course. And we'll continue to plug away.
Yeah, and I would sort of highlight to investors, I mean, this whole area is absolutely crucial for personalized medicine. And we're getting new sort of therapies coming into it. Like I know vaccines are moving into sort of oncology as well. So we not only get the immunotherapies, but the vaccines as well. And all of that will require expertise in how the immune system responds to those treatments to get those accelerated into patients. And if we can become a de facto standard as one of the building blocks to do that, then there's going to be a lot of work for your team in Dortmund, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, thanks very much for your time, gents, and best of luck. We'll chat as soon as we get some more sort of good contract news.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Paul. Nice to meet you.